Welcome to the Superheroes Everyday podcast. I'm Danny Horn. Thank you for joining us. Superheroes Everyday is a comedy blog about the history of superhero movies, starting with Superman the movie in 1978 and telling the story of how superhero blockbusters became the world's most efficient way to painlessly separate money from the public and then give it to entirely the wrong people. On the blog, I'm writing about the movies in release order, but here on the podcast, we'll be covering pivotal moments in superhero movie history, today addressing the 2018 Spider-Man version of Garfield minus Garfield, Venom. Now, I know there are other podcasts that you want to waste your time on, like this can't be the only one. So I'm using the Sid Field 3-act structure to break up the episode. This is Act 1 of Venom, and then I'll be releasing Act 2 and Act 3 later on in the week. And now I want to introduce my guest, back by popular demand, Anthony Strand from Tough Pigs and the Muppet Movie Podcast, moving right along. Hey, Anthony.
Hey, Danny. Thanks for having me back to talk about Venom.
I'm so excited that you're back. You were on the show in episode 3. We were talking about Steel, and now you wanted to talk about Venom. So I'm assuming that you only like movies with one-word titles.
That's right. Every movie that I like is one-word title. I liked Fargo.
You're into Fargo? You're into what? Next we'll do like Jaws or Goodfellas?
Yeah, well, man, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great if we could talk about Jaws or Goodfellas or Fargo instead of Steel and Venom?
That actually might be that might be an idea for a new podcast that we can take on is the one-word title podcast.
We're gonna talk about the 2013 Fast Snail DreamWorks movie Turbo for some reason. Yes. I wanted to talk about Venom because, like you said, I was here for Steel last time. And Venom, you called it Garfield minus Garfield. This feels the most like a 90s usually failed franchise starter superhero movie.
Yes.
I think anything we're ever going to get again. Like, I know they have tried to make a universe out of this since then, right? With Morbius and the Venom sequel and all that. But like, this movie feels like it's the Venom movie from 1998 in almost every way.
Should I ask you to explain that now, or is that going to happen along the way?
Well, I'll set up the basic theory,
okay,
which is that like back in especially pre-X-Men, as you've talked on this blog in certain movies, Steel was one of them.
Yep.
Studios would get the rights to a superhero, and there wasn't this concern about making sure that comics fans were satisfied or like recognized the character, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you need to do that to make a good movie. I don't think Tim Burton's Batman cares about comics really. And I think that's a great movie. And I think Batman Returns is even better, frankly.
Yeah. As long as you have like a style of your own.
Right. But after the MCU, after 2008, right? After Iron Man and The Dark Knight.
Yes.
There was this idea that everything has to be this like love letter to the fans. And there are some of that in this. There's like lines lifted specifically from comics. But I'm no expert on Venom comics, but
yeah, Venom
comics have Spider-Man in them.
There are spin-offs. He became popular enough to start a comic book of his own.
Right. No, of course. Right. But what I'm saying is that like Venom's origin kind of needs to include Spider-Man to make any sense.
To explain why he looks like a big black Spider-Man. Yeah.
Exactly.
And can crawl up walls and stuff.
Yeah. Yes. And also, no version of Eddie Brock that I've ever read has been like a sweaty, nervous, mumble-mouthed weirdo. Like this is Tom Hardy coming in and being like, I want to play this character as a sweaty, nervous, mumble-mouthed weirdo, you know?
Yes, for sure.
Which makes it feel like Steel or the Phantom or...
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
I totally do. Yes.
Like the 1990 Captain America movie where Red Skull is Italian, you know, or something.
Where it's just, this is a person, he wants to make this character, and we're going to say, okay. And we're going to make that happen. And if that leads to something, then great, or not.
Right. And like, I'm not going to lie, I don't think this is a good movie. Like, if we're talking about like good, high quality, you know, it's no Jaws or Goodfellas, right?
Right.
But I think it's fun. I think this, especially like once Venom shows up.
Which takes a minute, but
which takes about almost halfway.
Well, I'm going to do a little backstory.
Okay.
For the people. That, like you said, like Sony made these successful Spider-Man movies, 2002, 2007, and then they rebooted it in 2012 and 2014. And Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire original trilogy, was very successful. but not as successful once the MCU started, as Iron Man and then the Avengers and all of that. So they loaned the character to the MCU for Captain America Civil War in 2016 and then Spider-Man Homecoming in 2017. And so Sony makes money from that. But
no, that's not right though.
Is that not right?
You're right that Sony makes money from the MCU movies, Civil War, Infinity War, etc. that Spider-Man is in. But the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies are produced in-house by Sony. Disney gets a cut of those, but Sony makes them. So it's even weirder than what you're saying. Like Sony is producing these spectacularly successful Spider-Man movies, but they also can't have it cross over with whatever this thing is.
And what this thing is they have all of the other ancillary characters and supporting characters from Spider-Man. So they're looking at that and they're saying, so what can we do with this? Like, it's a lot of characters.
Yeah.
But as you say, the whole universe doesn't really make sense without having Spider-Man at the center of it. And so they have assembled, by this point, they call it the Sony Spider-Man universe, the SSU. And it's a little embarrassing. They've made 3 so far. They made Venom and Venom 2 and Morbius with limited success, but there are more on the way. There's one being made right now.
Well, so you say limited success. I mean, that's true, but Venom, we talked about Into the Spider-Verse up front.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right, which I think is a million times better. Truly, yes. A much better movie in every way.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Venom made more money, both in America and worldwide.
It made more than Across Into Spider-Verse? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it didn't make more than Across the Spider-Verse, which is made a lot more.
Huge, right.
But yeah, Into the Spider-Verse, and let me double check my figures here, because it always baffles me, because Into the Spider-Verse feels like it should be this landmark.
Yeah.
And it was the 6th highest grossing superhero movie and 4th highest grossing animated movie of 2018. Like,
yeah,
it's, so let me see here for 2018. Venom was number 13 at the box office with 213 million in the US, and Spider-Verse was number 15 with 190.
And that's amazing. Getting 213 million is an amazing amount. Unfortunately, the thing that really drives Sony's FOMO is that year Black Panther was number 1 and Avengers Infinity War was number 2. And just blew all of that out of the water. Aquaman did better. Deadpool 2. There was Ant-Man and the Wasp. It was a real big year for superhero movies.
It was so many, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the worldwide. Venom was number 7 for worldwide. This thing made $856 million, and Spider-Verse was way down at number 25.
For Venom, the reviews were awful.
It's not a good movie.
It has a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's the 30% that just thought it was kind of cool to see Venom.
Which, to be fair, kind of is.
Before we get into Act 1, can we actually talk about the closing credits real quick?
Yeah, you wanted to discuss Eminem.
Right, because I think the key to what's wrong, like part of what makes this movie feel like the late 90s too, is that Eminem does the closing. Eminem wrote and recorded an original rap for the closing credits, which goes in part, Venom. I got that adrenaline momentum, and I'm not knowing when I'm ever going to slow up, and I'm ready to snap at any moment. Thinking it's time to go get them. They ain't going to know what hit them when they get bit with the venom. And it's like... I would call that substandard. It's very substandard. It's terrible. Like I said to Roz, my wife Roz, when we watched this movie, I was like, that's really Eminem, right? And she's like, no, it isn't. And it is. And what is wild to me is that Eminem, who again, like his glory days are way behind him.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
Was just like, I'll do the end credits rap for the Venom. He probably grew up reading Venom or whatever, Yeah. He's like some like white rap fan from Detroit, right?
Like it feels very 90s, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles kind of song.
Very, exactly. That's the thing. So like, I think this movie needs to be viewed through the lens of they thought it would be cool to get Eminem to do the rap.
Right. All right, let's get into Act 1. We start out in space, and here comes a Life Foundation spaceship. They have secured some specimens, and now they're returning to Earth. This is not a NASA mission. It's one of them privately funded missions where they think safety regulations are stifling innovation. And they have apparently been visiting the outer space equivalent of the wreck of the Titanic. We hear some kind of commotion. Something's gotten loose. People scream Mayday for like a hot second, and then the ship just burns and crashes into the earth. I told them about the carbon fiber. I told them it was not safe. Nobody listens to me.
Well, and this sequence also establishes the movie's very frequent use in the subtitles of the word squelching. I always watch movies with the subtitles on, and no movie has ever had squelching.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, the entire movie is squelching.
That's all it is.
Yeah, that could have been the title. So there is a lot of squelching coming up. We have touchdown in East Malaysia, which I am pretty sure has its own concerns. Like, they don't need this. This is not helping the people of East Malaysia. There are Life Foundation employees on the scene, along with, I don't know who, EMTs and whoever they have over in East Malaysia. They are bringing scary specimens of terrifying, squelching alien life off of that crash ship. Like, I don't know what they were looking up for up there, but they found some Lovecraft shit, and now it is here on the planet. Tell me about the aliens for you.
They're bad. I don't like them. Because like it's one of those things where if they really had done a Venom movie in the 90s, there would have been some element of practical effects, I think, to it.
Right.
They're just substandard CG, like moving around, and
just
it doesn't have any
all
weight.
Over you. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not into it.
I like the way that I think that they make it scary. So not necessarily the look of it, which I agree looks kind of cheap, but like they always make sure that they are doing a scary thing every single moment that you see them.
Sure. Yeah. They're like hitting against the glass and
being terrifying. And so right now where they are is in these little glass containers, and then one of them has broken out because apparently this entire operation cannot figure out how to make something that works. So meanwhile, in the San Francisco Bay Area, the Life Foundation is run by this very demanding asshat CEO named Carlton Drake. Carlton Drake, he is irritated every time that we see him, and I am irritated by him in return.
So I have a lot of goodwill towards Riz Ahmed, the actor who plays him. I agree with you that he's not very good in this, but I think it's interesting to cast like a British Indian actor as the villain. But he's not playing British. He's doing this American accent.
Yes.
And he's doing this very like, hello, sir, American accent, I think.
Yes.
That's one of those things, too, where I think many actors, when asked to do an accent that is not their own, focus too much on the accent and like their charisma is drained out. And I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, I don't like that he is angry and upset all of the time. I find him incredibly annoying.
Sure, because he should be charismatic.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And instead he's just demanding all of the time. And it's one of those situations where like I know that we're not supposed to like the villain, and the villain is not supposed to be nice. He's going to do bad things. But I think they do such a good job of making me hate him that it makes me hate the movie.
Well, the villain should be fun to watch.
Yeah.
And he's not.
I have recently had some experiences with bad bosses. And so maybe I'm just like, I think Drake is just triggering me. Like he's always running around. Like there's always like an ongoing crisis that is clearly his fault. But instead of leaving his employees alone and letting them just do their fucking job, like he's badgering them for pointless status reports all of the time. And so he runs in. That is what he wants. There was some kind of breach. They've recovered 3 of the samples. One of the organisms got out and is missing. They find one astronaut who is momentarily alive, but clearly dying. And then there's an EMT who's taking care of him in an ambulance. And then suddenly he sits up and he extrudes a tentacle, a scary black tentacle from his arm. And he grabs her neck. And then he also grabs the driver and makes them crash the ambulance. So this is the one that just loves to smash stuff up. With enormous force, the specimen, which is now inhabiting the EMT's body, busts through the roof of the ambulance. And she just starts walking down the street. And now she's going to walk all the way from East Malaysia to San Francisco.
That's what you do.
It's going to take her a hot minute to do that. And then we get to our sleepy main character, Eddie Brock, as played by Tom Hardy. You have already indicated the twitchy, sweaty, always a little bit sleepy Eddie Brock.
Well, it's such a like Tom Hardy. I think most people know who he is or are familiar with him in something, right? Inception or Batman. What's that Batman movie he's in? Dark Knight Rises or whatever.
Right.
And what's the movie where he plays a clone of Captain Picard, Star Trek Nemesis? He's in a lot of stuff. He's done like more serious work too, but he's done a lot of genre stuff.
Right.
And I feel like he's trying to keep himself entertained. Like,
yes,
I feel like that's why he has made this choice, is that everybody made fun of him about the Bane voice,
yeah.
I was born in the dark, Batman.
Yeah.
So in this one, he's like trying to make it like interesting for himself. And he does that by just like playing Eddie Brock like a man who is on the verge of a nervous breakdown from minute one.
There was an interview on the YouTube channel Comics Explained where they asked him, what was your favorite scene to film? And he said, oh, they're all scenes that weren't in the movie. There are like 30 to 40 minutes worth of scenes, all of them. Like mad puppeteering scenes, dark comedy scenes. You know what I mean? They just never made it in.
That's what he said. Mad puppeteering
scenes. And that went everywhere across the entire like entertainment journalism ecosystem.
Sure.
Where everybody was writing like 30 to 40 minutes were cut out of Venom. And Tom Hardy said that those were all the best scenes. Like every outlet ran that story. And it was 4 days before the movie comes out. So that was not good promotion technique at all.
Right.
It definitely lowered expectations. And a couple months later, he had to clarify that he was just talking about like he had the freedom to goof around and improvise. And so when the question was like, what was your favorite scene to film? He's responding like the ones where I was messing around. Those were the most fun. And so it's not necessarily that there are like a good 30 to 40 minutes that we don't see. It's just like you say, like he's kind of in this just to have fun being this character.
Right. And to a degree, I do think it works. Like, I think this movie is more fun to watch because of how like offbeat his performance is.
Yeah.
Than it would be if he just played it like, Ryan Reynolds in Green Lantern.
Right. Completely straight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they are super invested in making him cool. Speaking of Green Lantern, like there's a complicated system for indicating that a main character is cool. And since I saw Green Lantern, I've been thinking of that as the gold standard of this. Because in Green Lantern, like this is how they introduce Hal Jordan. He gets out of bed with a naked lady, and then he drives a really cool car with loud music playing. They talk about how rebellious he is. And he's late for his first scene, which is always important. Like you have to show up late if you're cool. Eddie does every single one of those plus more. He gets out of bed, haven't had sex with a lady. He drives a motorcycle rather than a cool car, loud music playing. They show film clips of him being rebellious. He's late for his first scene. Plus, he's wearing black.
That's true.
So he's one up on Hal. They have done everything that they can possibly do. He is the coolest character on the podcast. And we find out he's friends with poor people, too, later on.
Yeah, he has a homeless friend who sells him free newspapers for $5.
And he's friends with the woman who runs the corner store. And he's friends with, now we're going to see the security guard. And he has like a relationship with the security guard, too. He's parked his motorcycle directly in front of the doors where the security guard, who he is clearly friends with, asks him to move the bike, but he doesn't because he is a rebellious rascal. And we are still setting up how cool he is. There's 3 steps to getting the audience to like a character. Make a friend, make a joke, make something happen that moves the plot along. And so far, like they are establishing that he, as much as they can for that he wakes up with Anne and then he's friends with the security guard. He has friends kind of all the way through. And that is something, it's a cue for the audience that it's okay for us to like him too. That there are people in the narrative who like him. And so with the security guard, now we've established. Yeah.
Because as we've established, nothing about
him is
right. Nothing about the way Tom Hardy is playing this character would make you like him.
Because he's playing it very self-centered.
Yes, it's just a strange choice.
He's in love with his own cleverness and his own coolness. And so how you adapt to that is going to impact a lot how you're going to feel about this whole movie. Now, Eddie's very judgmental boss has gotten Eddie a big exclusive interview with Carlton Drake about his failed rocket explosion. And apparently it's supposed to be a pro-Drake puff piece, which we have been informed through the video editing. Pro-Drake puff piece is exactly the kind of thing that Eddie doesn't do.
Right. It seems like he's a gotcha journalist all the time.
Yeah. And so it's weird. I mean, it's the plot. But it within the story, it's weird. This appears to be sabotage on the part of the boss. because this seems like the kind of thing that you could send anybody out for, but he has
Yeah.
to be a hard ass boss because, again, this gives Eddie more coolness credit. Eddie goes to dinner with Annie and they talk about the interview. And so here's where they establish that Anne's law firm, she's a lawyer, her law firm has Drake as a client. And she is advising him he needs to be careful so he doesn't lose his job, but he is too cool to be careful about things.
But also, it seems unethical to me that she could be fired for anything he does in this interview. Like,
yeah,
that doesn't seem. It seems like they would have to give a different reason. You just, I mean, like, spoiler, we're jumping ahead. Like, she gets fired because of this, but it's like,
yeah. Well, let me just tell people kind of, because it's just the next scene. Next scene, Annie is sleeping, and Eddie gets up and he looks on her computer and sees that there's an email coming in that's about a case briefing about the Life Foundation. And so, as with, every computer bought on Gilligan's Island, he sees like exactly the thing that he's looking for just when he needs it. And him doing that is going to result in him getting fired, losing Anne, and Anne getting fired. Yeah, and you think that that's unfair?
Well, I think,
or just wouldn't happen.
Well, I think I don't know. I mean, I guess the idea is that, like, she told him, right? Like, that's the implication. Yeah. Like, that's what they would think. Yeah. I suppose that's fair. All right. You convinced me. Venom is rock solid.
It really is. His boss is mad and Eddie gets fired. Annie's upset because she got fired, and she gives him back his engagement ring and she walks away. And this is basically what happens to every single person who comes into contact with a tech billionaire. Like, they're extremely dangerous people, and any contact is going to be hazardous for you. And then we see Drake getting a shipment of the 3 spooky samples of goo, which kind of slurps out of the container. It's black and yellow, and it's unhealthy looking.
And I mean, are we going to talk about Dora yet, or save it?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about Dora. Yeah, Jenny Slate, who's hilarious.
Jenny Slate, who is hilarious in everything but this movie.
Up to and not including this. Yeah.
Right. And when, like, I mean, people might know her from Parks and Rec. She was Mona Lisa on that show. She's star of the movie Obvious Child, which is a great movie.
Yeah.
She's star of the Marcel with Shell on Marcel the Shell with Shoes on movie.
Yes.
All kinds of stuff. And she's great. Her stand-up is wonderful. When I say that she isn't funny in this movie, I don't mean like she's doing a bad job at comedy. She doesn't play a character who, like, she doesn't get to do even a little bit of comedy in the movie.
Yeah.
There's nothing funny about the way this role is written. And they hired Jenny Slate.
Yeah, she has a couple of nice takes. Like, I think they could have hired, like, just because she has so much personality, I think it kind of shines through in little bits and pieces sometimes. I agree that it's totally not a funny part, and it is very weird to have her in. It's
weird.
They gave her kind of a funny name. Her name is Dora Skirth.
Dora Skirth, right. Well, but I think when you first see her, or at least when I first saw her, you expect her to be Kat Dennings in Thor, right?
Yeah,
you expect her to be
the funny one.
Yeah, like the funny sidekick, and then she just isn't, and it's one of the many weird things about this movie.
Yeah, totally agree. We go back to East Malaysia, and things are not going well there. There's a zombie EMT staggering into a market, and she reaches into a bucket of eels. And she takes an eel that doesn't belong to her, and she just bites its head off. And
squelching.
Does the eel is squelching as well?
The biting sound is squelching.
It's squelching.
Yeah. That's one of the great squelchings. Yeah.
The stall owner gets upset naturally, and she gets like a dose of personal criticism, which she does not appreciate. And so she forms this huge black razor sharp spike on her hand, and she whips it, and she slashes the guy's throat, just killing him. And this,
but it's PG-13 style, so we don't see the cut.
Yeah, no, bloodless murder with no consequence. Yeah. But East Malaysia goes into a panic, and a bunch of people run off. And it's hard to say why, but the monster that's inside of her decides she sees this bent up old lady, and apparently this is like trading up. So they they want to show that, like, this alien goo can move from one person into another person and then possess them. So she possesses this little old lady, and now she's walking away to her new life as a murder demon. Caption says 6 months later. East Malaysia must be pretty much picked clean by now. And we go back to the Life Foundation and Dora Skirth. She is doing an experiment where she's sticking this alien stuff into a rabbit and then watching it die. Basically what they've invented sort of a strange explanation for what's going on, which is that these black gooey alien creatures need to live inside of a host to survive in an oxygen rich environment like the one that we have, which is true in the movie except for all of the times where it's not, and the goo basically can just do whatever it wants. But there has to be an exact match between the symbiote and the host, which is not explained at all.
Well, I think that it's hard to say. I think it has to be a perfect emotional match, because I don't know if you remember, Danny, but on my planet, I was a loser like you, Eddie. Like that's what the
You're
match
right.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like this rabbit is not a good enough emotional match. The goo doesn't want to live inside this rabbit.
Exactly.
It hates this rabbit. Yeah. And that's why the rabbit just dies immediately. Yeah, that's a good point. Carlton Drake is extremely excited about all this rabbit murder. He wants to begin human trials immediately.
6 months. It's been 6 months already. That's for a billionaire tech billionaire.
Oh yeah,
that's too long.
Yeah, he already bought and ruined 3 other companies. He's coming back. He wants a status report. So she is not pleased with this. Dora is not pleased because it's too early. They don't know what this goo is actually going to do to people. And so he acts like a mob boss, which feels very early in the movie to me, where he tells her, like, think of future generations. Think of your kids. Hey, how are your kids?
Like the mask shouldn't drop yet, is what you're saying?
Yeah, for him to just like be obviously mob boss, like you said before, like he should be more charismatic and winning people over by this point, but that's not the way that he's playing Drake at all. And then meanwhile, Eddie. So now we see Eddie. He's not doing great. He's drunk and he's lonely and unhappy. And on his way home, he talks to this like musical comedy homeless woman named Maria. And he has like this really playful relationship with her because he's a man of the people and he's cool with poor people.
Right. And she's like, I got all the free newspapers here. I'll sell you one for $5. And he's just like, I'll give you 20 to not sing your songs or whatever.
Exactly. Right? So he's the man of the people.
He's being a nice guy.
And so then he goes into this market, which is run by Mrs. Chen, who I think she's the best character in the movie.
I agree.
She has funny lines. I like her a lot. They know each other really well, and he walks in, and the first thing she says is, Eddie, you look like shit. It's all of these kind of stylized relationships with lower class people that they're counting on to make him likable, and it doesn't not work.
No, and that feels very comic booky, I think. Like,
yes, for sure.
That the hero like knows everyone in this neighborhood, and
it's Peter. That's a Peter Parker thing. Like Peter would.
It's very Peter Parker.
Would know everybody.
Or like, I mean, you and I talked about Steel last time.
Yeah. Oh, like, yeah, for sure.
It's honestly, it's very John Henry Irons in the comic, and even in the movie, like in the Steel movie, they do the same thing, which is another way that this feels like 1998. Like, I mean, it really is.
Yeah. Eddie goes home to his apartment, which I think we're supposed to think is a crap hole because there's a neon sign outside his window, and we hear a police siren. But he lives in San Francisco, and a place this size would cost the earth. It is enormous. He could tidy it up a bit, but besides that, it's huge. He can't afford this apartment. Plus, he's giving $20 away to the homeless girl. But let's go get involved in human sacrifice. We are back in the Mad Science Academy, where Drake is attended by his posse of lab coat flunkies, and he gives them a big warm-up speech about how they're going to save humanity or whatever, and then they bring in this lonely loser who's going to get murdered by this. I guess he's like a junkie or something. He's this obvious, like, very easy to sacrifice character. They lock him in a big glass box with the alien ooze kind of squirming around. And the guy's name is Isaac. And this speech makes me crazy, where Drake gives him this big dramatic speech where he's like trying to use his tech bro charisma.
Well, and it's like the dude's name is Isaac, just so that
we can talk about Drake, sacrifice. Yeah.
Yeah, just so that Drake can be like, in the biblical story, Abraham sacrifices his son Isaac and all this stuff. And it's like, okay.
I was wondering like what he does when other people come in with different names. Like if his name is Darnell, he's like, you know what? There's a story in the Bible, Darnell. It's about sacrifice. Like you'd be amazed how many stories there are in this kind of like pre-murder Bible class that he's doing. That night, Eddie's out on the street again. He notices his homeless friend isn't there, which is suspicious. And then he's being followed by Dora Skirth. Drake has a lab full of poor people. They're all dying, and she's afraid to go to the cops. And so she wants him to do an expose. And this would be the perfect opportunity for Eddie to start getting actually involved in the plot of this movie. And he says, no, no, thank you. I don't think I even want to be in a Venom movie.
Right, that's true. That's true. It's just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
You're like, you say it like no thing, but he's so like, no, I'm not. I'm never going back there. Like
Yeah.
it's like it's such a like I truly can't get over how weird Tom Hardy is in this movie.
Yeah. And this is kind of like it's a little speed bump moment. This is actually like that this is the thing audiences don't like, which is
Right.
when a
It's
character's like
just
getting in the way of the plot development. This is the like make a joke, make a friend, make something happen. Like you're supposed to be pro plot development.
right. Well, but I mean, it's that refusing the call thing, right?
That is
Like
true. Yeah,
that's how we ended up here.
you are so
Is
right.
is Joseph Campbell,
Hmm.
right? Or is that the guy? Am I
Yeah, no, you're
confusing? I
absolutely
can't
correct.
remember. It's
No,
Joseph Campbell, yeah.
Joseph Campbell. Yeah, the
And it's
hero's
like
journey.
the hero's journey thing, and part of it is refusing the call, which is always boring and never interesting and should not ever happen and happens all the time. You
Yes.
know, because it's like one of the things people feel like they have to put
Yeah.
in their story.
Yeah.
Whereas it would be way better if people were just like, yeah, I'm the hero of this movie. I'll do the
I'm just
thing.
gonna go and do a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
He goes and stands outside. He's just a stalker standing outside Annie's row house. And when she shows up, he's not actually even that cool about it. And she introduces Dan, her new boyfriend, who's Reed Scott from Veep.
Yeah. See, I think of him as Reed Scott from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but yeah.
Yes, yeah,
So I love Dan. I think he's great.
yeah.
And it's this thing. You've already covered Superman Returns. Remind me.
No, not yet.
Okay, well, Superman Returns, I think, is the creation of this trope,
Yeah.
which is where in that movie, Lois, Superman's been gone for 5 years, and
Hmm.
Lois has a new boyfriend, Richard, played by James Marsden, and
Right.
he is a better boyfriend, a
Hmm.
better father to the kid,
Yeah.
all this stuff, better guy than Superman in that movie, which is one of the
Which
problems
is
with
hard to
which one of
do.
the
Yeah.
problems with that movie, yeah. And in this one, it's the same thing, right?
Hmm.
Dan is like immediately sympathetic towards Eddie.
Yeah.
Like we'll see in an upcoming scene that he like goes over the top to help Eddie when he really doesn't need to,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Even just like right here in this first scene, like his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend is just showing up outside the house like a crazy stalker. And
Yeah.
he's just like, how are you doing, Eddie? Oh, so nice to meet you. Great to see you.
Right, right. So it's clear from this moment
Hmm.
that Annie's better off with Dan than she was
Yeah.
with Eddie, and that she would be with Eddie if they got
Yes.
back together.
Hmm.
You know? And I'm not sure that the movie wants us to think that, but it's like undeniable. You know?
Yes. Yeah. That this is as far as like there's always for audiences there's the character or the choices that like the character should make in order like within the narrative in order to have a better life for her. She should absolutely choose Dan, but we don't want that as the audience because that's super boring. And so finally Eddie's thinking about this and he goes and calls Doris Skirth and they break into the Life Foundation late at night so that Eddie can sneak around and take pictures of things on his phone like a professional journalist does. But there is some exposition here if you want it. Drake's exploring space to find new places for humanity to live. And apparently he found this comet that has living organisms on it, which they have just kind of like scooped up and put in these jars. I'm not sure what all these violent blobs of goo get up to on their own comet, what kind of life they have out there. But once they're here on Earth, they got to bond with the host.
It's because of our oxygen rich atmosphere or whatever. So they're just bumming around out in space.
But there's supposed to be a million of them, according to Venom later on. And I don't know what a million of these little slime monsters could even get up to on their
They just have a
comet.
party.
Yeah, it's just like it's goo party all the time.
Yeah, it's constant goo party.
Eddie is kind of sneaking around in this like spooky post-apocalyptic future science place. It's all blue and glowy. And there's kind of it's these little cages, basically, these little glass cages. And Eddie sees that in one of them, there's Maria, the homeless girl from outside the market. He grabs a fire extinguisher and he bangs on the glass until he manages to break it. And she kind of tumbles out. And instead of being grateful and saying thank you, she starts acting like a zombie for really no reason, just like jumping on him and strangling him and stuff. The symbiote passes from Maria into Eddie. Well, so now Eddie's got superpowers. So he does all these things. He can like kick off a wall and sort of slide past somebody, and then he breaks through a closed metal door. and he goes through a fence and he just keeps on running. And meanwhile, the security guards are shooting at him like a lot, like bang, bang, bangity bang, like you do in movies. And then there's this all-terrain dune buggy that springs up out of nowhere in particular. And now that's chasing him. And these guards are like shooting wildly into the forest. Like they are determined. They're really going to bag this dude.
Right. Well, the dune buggy, I don't really know. They're like in a forest, like you say.
Yeah.
And so my dad has this thing called a prowler.
Yeah.
Which, do you know what this is?
Is that like an all-terrain thing?
Yeah, but it's tiny. I mean, it's like a little thing with like, it's kind of like a golf cart with like a pickup bed, you know.
Yeah,
basically is how I would describe it.
Yeah.
And that's what this thing looked like to me. Like it just seemed like my dad tooling around after Venom in his prowler.
Yeah.
Like, to go pick up sticks at the park or whatever. And I don't know why they thought this would be a cool vehicle for this movie.
Yeah, especially like kind of chasing somebody through, it's like woods basically outside the Life Foundation. And so like it doesn't seem like the most effective way to chase after somebody when there's trees around.
It seems like a vehicle that is going to hit a medium-sized tree and
right
fall
and
apart.
Stop. Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
It's not good.
But I think, part of why it's there is just like that it turns out both here and throughout the movie that there's basically an independent militia that works for the Life Foundation. It's like a lot of bad mercenary dudes who have like a very strong murder incentive program. Like they are determined to hunt this guy down and kill him for daring to sneak into the Life Foundation.
Well, he did bring up the wrongful death lawsuit.
That's true.
Like he has history in this place.
Yes.
He got kicked out once already.
Yeah. And so now second time, there's no third strike here. He's just he's got to go. Yeah. But they lose sight of him because he has climbed all the way up to the top of a tree very quickly. And he just waits there for all the guys to go away.
Mm-hmm. All night.
Eddie's very confused by this sudden turn of events. And with our two lead characters united for the first time, this is the end of Act 1 of Marvel's Venom. I'll be releasing Act 2 later this week, and you'll hear all about that. Here's what's coming up.
I think it's a much better choice than if Venom just was like, "Hello, Eddie, hello, Eddie, I am an alien,"
And he says, "I don't want to waste any more time. I want to up the tests." Which I love. I don't know what upping the tests means, but he's very clear.
He's very into it.
Those tests need to be upped.
Eddie says, "What the shit, man?" Because it's PG-13 movie and they only got one F word, which they're going to use later. Movies are good. I just love cinema, Danny.
Yeah, I know. This piece of cinema in particular? Hard to say.
Sure.
All right, stay tuned for that. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thanks.
So I'll meet you back here for Act 2 of Venom on the Superheroes Everyday podcast. Thanks for listening.
You're going to go feed on a whole planet?
Yes, but it is different now, Eddie. I have decided to stay.
Wow.
On my planet, I am kind of a loser, like you. But here, we could be more.
Excuse me?